Any moment
Okay.
now. Hello, my friends. Welcome once again. We are back again for a two-part special streaming day today. I appreciate everyone who checked out our conversation with Brianna Joy Gray. That was a blast. So if you missed that, make sure you guys check that out. But we are here with our teacher, the man himself, and I'm looking forward to this conversation a lot. Welcome to Hampton Leftists once again, my brother Dr. Cornel West. Thank you for joining us today.
My brother, I salute you. I salute your work, your vision, your courage, your willingness to serve and sacrifice, though, man. You a truth teller. And the older brother like me, see a young brother like you throwing down with this kind of fire in your soul, it brings joy to my heart. And I want to salute Brother James as well. Y'all got the dynamic duo working here.
Yeah,
It's good.
I cannot stress enough, and I want to toss it to here, James, because last time we had a conversation, I brought Jackie on. I had to bring James on because I know so many of us at Frampton Left is looking forward to having conversation with you, Dr. Cornel West, because I cannot emphasize enough, especially now we have this network of Black leftists, and it's very incredible when I have conversation with my brother JB, my brother Jackie, my brother RJ, and among Black leftists. I don't know how much. I don't know even understand how influential you have been in your work when it comes to our political development, especially in a society where it's very easy for well-educated, well-off Black men to just join the oligarchy and forces of oppression. We've seen that happen all the time, where they tend to repeat milquetoast neoliberal talking point because that's good for their career. So having an intellectual like you who actually willing to speak the truth to power, even if Harvard might retaliate, that alone helped us out a lot. So this is gonna be a very fun conversation.
Mhm.
No, I appreciate that though, but keep in mind though, man, is that I have no monopoly on truth. I come to learn from you all as well, and we got such a rich tradition. The Robin Kellys, the Bell Hooks. Now, of
Yes.
course, Cedric Robinson, he's passed, but his insights are still there. We got towering figures who continue to Gerald Horn. I mean, good God, we just lost Brother Glenn Ford. Y'all know that. I love that brother deeply, intensely, man. A Black Agenda Report. So that the beautiful thing is that all of us are waves in oceans that are bigger than us. And so we're stronger when we learn and listen in this regard. And I deeply appreciate that. I heard a little bit of you and Brianna early on. It was rich, it was deep. And the other sister, too. What was her name?
Afeni, you got to talk to like she's
Finney.
amazing.
Finney.
She's
Yeah.
really about this life because she's out there actually doing mutual aid drives, running
She threw
Yeah.
organizations,
down in a
actually helping
serious way.
Yeah.
folks.
That's the name of Tupac's mother.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like I love
Afeni Shakur. Yeah.
her.
Oh,
Hmm.
absolutely. We used to have Tupac right on the front row, House of Lord, Pentecostal Church, Reverend Herbert Daltrey, National Black United Front, when he was 10 years old. And Finney would bring him to the Timbuktu Learning Center where we would lecture every Wednesday night. And I
Mm.
remember Tupac every week there with a Finney. And a Finney was just a magnificent sister in so many ways. So the Finney that you all in dialogue with also part of a rich legacy of Black radicals and Black revolutionaries. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah,
Hmm.
as soon as I saw Fanny, we had to get her on. I think JB remember. I remember I saw a video clip of her. She was at one of the protests because she's always protesting. Like she always out
Yeah.
there with the horn, and
Yeah.
that's the mentality that we want to breed as Black leftists here at Fred Hampton Leftists is
Hmm.
actually direct action, putting pressure on the powerful, and that what Finney does all the time. So what we want to do here is gather those like-minded voices because there's
Hmm.
not a lot of Black leftist media spaces, and
Hmm.
you laid out how we do have a lot of truth tellers before, and that's an
Yeah.
amazing point. And I'll get you in here, JB here,
Hmm.
but the problem is there haven't been a lot of spaces for these truth tellers to exist. Like they
Hmm.
usually get locked out of mainstream media, and that's why I remember Jackie was asking about how do they let you in because a lot of these people tell the truth, and that's the
Yeah.
quickest way to get locked out. And once again, we saw how Harvard retaliated against you because you simply stand up for the Palestinian people. That's
Hmm.
just one of many examples. So what we want to do, and I want to see this done everywhere, not even just us. Like we need to come together as an organization, as Black leftists, to promote ideas. I want to get JB in here. What's your thoughts, brother?
So one of the things that I wanted to bring to light was, as you were talking about, you are not just teaching, but you're also a learner. I I'd be remiss if I didn't quote the scripture that says, iron sharpens iron, so as we sharpen the face of one another. So the thing is that we are constantly learning from each other. The best teachers are the best learners, and so that's what I'm here to do. I'm also here to learn as well. So
Oh, that's beautiful, though, brother. That's
yeah,
beautiful, man.
yeah, yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah, I remember you was one of the people who broke my Obama cognitive dissonance, because if you talk to a lot of black leftists, we have a very similar kind of path where we thought like Barack Obama was the path towards liberation. We thought he's gonna do a lot of great things for the black community, and your truth at the time, when
hmm
you was calling him out for his crimes against humanity. And that
yeah,
made people like me and James think a little bit more. That made people like me and
yeah.
Jackie think about a little more. So that's kind of knowledge and truth tells exactly what we want to promote here at Hampton Leftists.
Oh, I
hmm
hear you. I mean, part of it is that anybody who has a genuine love for black people knows that we are a desperate people. We're looking for ways out.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's just so hard to find concrete ways out that are effective and really accent the least of the poor and working class. And so
hmm
that desperation, that frustration, that confusion
hmm
breeds a certain kind of blindness. So people don't want to see certain things. You know what I mean? They don't want to see the hood. They only want to see the black middle class as a measure for black success and black progress. No, it's the black masses, it's the black poor and the working class. That's the measure of success. So no matter how many black faces you got in high places, if Jamal
hmm
and Letitia and their preciousness are being disrespected, they don't have access to health care, they don't have access to schools, the quality don't have access to jobs with a living wage or decent housing, then
hmm
your system is a failure.
hmm
Period.
yeah.
That's just a fundamental fact. Because if those same conditions were happening on vanilla sides of town, then you say the system's a failure. Well, we just telling the truth.
And here's the thing: people need to come to the realization among matters just as much as Nathan and Carrie, on the other side of town.
That's right.
And so the thing is that no person's worth more than the other. It's just
Absolutely.
that we have to look at everybody collectively as all precious in our eyes, just like some of us who believe in God, we're all precious in God's eyes. Some of us who are atheists, we have to look at each other as all as sentient beings who are precious in each other's eyes.
That's exactly right, though. And that's
Yeah.
one of the things you all represent here, Brother Nick, on your show and all of the voices, but especially the reference to Fred Hampton. You see, Fred Hampton came out of Black Baptist
Yeah.
Church, his mother deeply shaped by Black Baptist sensibility. As he was radicalized, as
Yeah.
he moved to the left, he always carried with him this deep love ethic. And
hmm
that's why when he talked about solidarity, the Rainbow Coalition, before Jesse was even around, I mean, he's talking about solidarity with oppressed people around the world, but it comes out of this deep love ethic because he had a moral and a spiritual source. And when you have that kind of love and you recognize black love is always a crime in the white supremacist civilization, just like black history, they try to reduce to a curse. They try to reduce black hope to a joke. They try to reduce black freedom to a pipe dream. No, we're going to be in that world, but not of it. We're going to go against it, which means we're going to get in a lot of trouble. We're going to be misunderstood, misconstrued. And you go as far as you can, use what you got and try to bear witness, but you have to be willing to pay a price. I mean, that is the measure of black love in a white supremacist society. You have to be willing to pay a price. Every great lover of black people, from Garvey, he deported. Now, I don't agree with all of Garvey's ideology, looking for a black empire and black army. No, I'm anti-imperialist no matter what color people are. But Garvey loved black people. They
hmm
deported him. Martin, Malcolm, Fannie Lou, you can go right across the board. Muhammad Ali, right across
hmm
the board. So then the question becomes, well, who's going to have the courage to love? And when you love, you tell the truth. So you get a Barack Obama, and you say, "Oh, we're so glad we broke the barrier. We got the black face at the highest level of the American empire." Now, what you gonna do? You gonna continue the war crimes? If you do, we're gonna call you a war criminal. Bush had 45 drones that already called a war criminal. You got 563. Hey, I didn't go to Sunday school for nothing. I got to be consistent. Those are war crimes. He's a war criminal. Wes, how could you call a black man, a black president, a war criminal? You must be trying to undercut his success. No, I got a vision of greatness. And that vision of greatness for me is biblical. He or she is greatest will be a servant, will serve the least of these, and therefore tell the truth. And the condition of truth is allow their suffering to be heard. And that includes people in Somalia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, on the West Bank, Jews in Russia. They mistreating the Jewish brothers and sisters in Russia. We're in solidarity. If Israel mistreating the Palestinians, we're in solidarity. But we are free black people, and nobody tells us who we love. We don't ask for nobody's permission as to who we love. That's exactly how we roll, you see. And yo, I know Kansas City, shoot. Introduce Charlie Parker, the sweetest saxophone player, Ben Webster. They free. They are free black folk. And of course, free human beings. We're talking about black people. And that's our tradition. And we got to keep that tradition alive, no matter how small the number, because it's in quality. It's not in quantity. It's in quality. One Nick, one James, one Affinity, full of fire is better than 35 milquetoast neoliberals on the mainstream media. They're just echoing each other. They just echo chambers. We come from the people that say lift every voice. It doesn't lift every echo. We can get an echo any way you want. Just change the color. Same old echo chamber of neoliberal half-truths and lies. No, we people hungry for the truth. They're hungry for the truth.
Yep, and that's like what we want to represent here is tell the truth, no matter how it inconveniences the neoliberal mind. Because I spar with many black nationalists, and these black nationalists, these people have the exact opposite mindset of what we are laying out. Well, we talk about how the Black Panthers, how Fred Hampton famously stood in solidarity with the Palestinians. He had South Africans stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people. And I talked to my friend Dr. Kareem Batesh. I really think this is the next step that we have to focus on intensely is building an international left, where we calling out all the oppression that is going on, and where we stand against all the communities that is impacted by U.S. imperialism, white supremacy. Because I'm talking to some of these black nationalists, and they're like super anti-immigrant, anti-gay. I haven't seen, and to me, when I see that, that's them. Their mind is still colonized, and they don't even know it. Like if you're like pushing anti-gay ideology, if you're not caring about what's happening in the state of Palestine and the genocide going on there, if you're not caring about the United States bombing Africa like they're doing right now, like if these things are something that you don't care about because black nationalists argue that we should only focus on our communities, that's actually your mind is actually colonized. You gotta decolonize your mind, and we gotta stand in solidarity with each other and other communities, because that's how we grow. That's how we change. That's how we build a community to fight white supremacy. If you're not for that, you're actually being complicit with white supremacy, whether you believe it or not. Do you have anything you want to add, James?
Absolutely. And so how are we as black people going to only care about ourselves when we know what it's like to be oppressed and we see other people be oppressed and we don't care about them as well? That doesn't sit right. And it shouldn't sit right with anybody, because the thing is that if we're seeing somebody oppressed abroad, we need to stand in solidarity with them and tell the people who are the oppressors to go, no, 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 no. You guys have to stop this. We demand that you stop this. Wasn't it Frederick Douglass himself who said, power concedes nothing without a demand? And the part that everybody needs to get into their heads is it never did and it never will. And so we must continue to make those demands to power so that they no longer oppress anybody at all in the world anymore, because we want a government that breeds compassion and equity and love. And if we're not doing that, then that means that we need to do our job to push them to be more compassionate, more equitable, and more loving.
No, I couldn't agree more with you. But we got to keep in mind, though. See, in my view, this is my humble opinion.
Mm-hmm.
that the greatest revolutionary and prophetic voice of the 20th century
Mm-hmm.
was a Muslim named Malcolm X.
Yes.
Now, he had a black nationalist stage that was very, very crucial in his development. And it was partly because he was critical of so many black people who love everybody but black people. Now, see, that's
Mm-hmm.
sick too. That's
Mm-hmm.
pathological. You see
Yes.
what I mean? So that when the three of us talk about solidarity, we're talking about a solidarity that begins on the chocolate side of town.
Yeah.
And you see, Malcolm's began on the chocolate side of town, and it took him a little while to extend because he was in a certain black nationalist orientation. Now, you remember
Mm-hmm.
those lines, and I just was blessed to write the 60th anniversary to Franz Fanon's Record of the Earth, the introduction to it. It'll be out in a couple of months. I'm going to make sure all y'all get a copy.
Okay.
But you remember in the pitfalls of national consciousness where he talks about how internationalism for him actually grows out of a rooting in a love of people and nation, but then transcends those peoples and nations. So we
Yeah.
begin by loving our mamas and our daddies. You begin by loving the chocolate side of Kansas City. Hey, that's where
Mm-hmm.
you're going to learn to love. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you recognize, lo and behold, I love these black folk. And in fact, their empowerment at the deepest level will take place when other people who are hated, oppressed, and dominated are also in power. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what we learned from the great Malcolm X. And see, there's somebody like Martin King. King had a nationalist stage in terms of being an American nationalist.
Mm-hmm.
That can be just as narrow as black nationalists. So because he can become so patriotic that he looks to the U.S. nation state as the center of things and doesn't realize it's just one nation state. It's actually an empire among 109 or some other nation states. Now, it's so that the fascinating tension between Martin and Malcolm, we both love both of them intensely, but they have different histories, different genealogies, and so forth and so on. So that's why even with black nationalists, it could be the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, it could be the early works of Amir Baraka or Maulana Karenga. Maulana Karenga is one of the great public intellectuals these days, still working in LA. The early works of Hakeem Mahabute, Sonia Sanchez, even as black nationalists, they still have a deep love inside of them. And we keep track of that love, and then we'll see whether they become internationalists. Because I think the two go hand in hand. I think the love of black
Yeah. I
people
think I
and
think
being internationals go hand in hand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what you said was beautifully laid out, and I love your perspective on that. And that's the message that I point out all the time. The reason why I am unapologetically fighting for a black agenda is through black love. It's through
Yes.
love of my black neighbors, my black brothers and sisters. And as I became radicalized, and as I became a socialist, and as I became anti-capitalist, I talked about this before. Like that radicalization alone made me a much nicer, a much more compassionate brother. Like because my mindset now that I know the extent of white supremacy, now that I know the extent of evil that is waged against my kind, I look at arguments with my brother, my sister, with whatever. I look at that as nonsense. And I think that's probably me as I matured, I got older. I still remember argument me and my brother got a few months ago, and then we stopped and we were like, "Why the fuck? Why are we arguing?" Like, because now my mindset changed. Like, we need to be lifting each other up. We need to be brothers, and that's why. And when I see like videos of black conflict, like it kind of make my skin crawl because I'm like, bro, we have so much going on right now. Like, why would you want to vilify your own brothers and sisters? And this is you laid out amazing historical context, but I see a lot of these people who are openly homophobic, and my brother James is a gay man. So how can you deny his love?
That's
How
right.
can you deny his validity? And that's what I'm talking about when I curse. Like I see a lot, and once again, you may not know, but I spar with a lot of these people who and they're like, oh, well, I think we all should be supporting straight heterosexual men or women, and I'm like, that's not the path to liberation. That is not what we want. And the reason why I focus so much on uplifting the black community, a second point, which I deeply appreciate that you made, Dr. Cornel West, is because I believe if you fight unapologetically for black issues, that's how you uplift everyone.
That's right.
And that's the argument I was making when I was canvassing for Bernie Sanders. And when we had the Medicare for All march, I was giving a speech in front of a lot of people. I'm saying, I told them Medicare for All is the most pro-Black policy that you can advocate for, because there's a healthcare genocide of our people. But at the same time, if you get Medicare for All, every community is uplifted, because there's still healthcare genocide of poor Latinos. There's a healthcare genocide of poor whites. So yeah, it affects our community the most. But if we advocate and we implement that uplifts the entire society. Now, that's just one example. Like canceling student loan debt is another one where we are largely impacted, but if we cancel student loan debt, it benefits everyone. You know what I mean? So this is why we unapologetically got to fight for our beliefs and advocate for our community, and not allow the capitalists to co-opt our language and tell us to accept scraps and so on. So I think what you said was amazingly impactful.
No, it's very important. I think part of the challenge, though, is that strong radical voices like you all, and not just you two, but your whole network, tends to be either misunderstood or just outright debased, because it presents such a fundamental challenge to how people think and feel and act. And that kind of radical challenge, people tend to want to hold at arm's length, because it just requires so much energy, so much effort. So that we tell the story. Okay, the 1960s, we got monstrous American apartheid in place. The unbelievable love warriors and freedom fighters of the 50s and 60s break the back of old Jim Crow. And you get two results. You get new Jim Crow for the Black masses, mass incarceration. You get mass incorporation of the Black middle classes and the Black bourgeoisie. They get unprecedented opportunities to gain access to become part of the system. So we begin to see Black faces in more and more and more and more high places. At the same time, the new Jim Crow, tied to poverty, tied to decrepit schools, dilapidated housing, tied to the police, invasion of drugs, invasion of guns. So you got these two basic realities. And then the question becomes, well, will the Black middle class, will the Black bourgeoisie itself become more and more neglectful of the Black poor and working classes and view itself as the center of the universe? So their opportunities become the main measure of Black progress. Will that Black bourgeoisie betray Black poor and working people and still want to talk about Blackness and still want to talk about their individual and personal agendas at the very moment when the new Jim Crow is becoming more and more pervasive? And that's exactly what happened. It's exactly what happened. Now, the unprecedented opportunity for the Black middle class was tied to a Cold War liberalism that tried to confine the Black struggle just to narrow rights with the U.S. nation state, not being in solidarity with decolonization in the third world, especially Africa, and not being critical of Wall Street, not being critical of the ruling classes in the United States. So Black middle class folk fighting for the crumbs, and they're never really a bourgeoisie. They're a lumpen bourgeoisie, because the Black bourgeoisie is a bourgeoisie under the larger American white bourgeoisie. So it still has to deal with being disrespected. It still has to deal with being discriminated against. It still has to deal with whether its voting rights will in fact be suppressed. And those voting rights are a preoccupation of the Black middle class. Why? Because most of the Black masses don't vote anyway. They've given up on the system. Now, I think they should vote, but that's just a fact. That's just a fact. So that I'm with Barbara and the others talking about poor people's campaign. I'm with them about voting rights. But if they're not talking about abolishing poverty in a fundamental way, the way Barbara and Thea Harris are talking about, the way Martin talked about it, the way Malcolm talked about it, the way Fannie Lou Hamer, the way Marion Wright Edelman talked about it, then they just want some neoliberal version of poverty, just like the folk in the 50s wanted a liberal version of Jim Crow. Just the way in the 1850s, they wanted a liberal version of slavery. No, we want the abolition of slavery. We want the abolition of Jim Crow. We want the abolition of poverty. We want the abolition of the relation between capital and labor. That's an asymmetric relation of power that has to do with the inability of workers' voices to ever be heard in the workers, in the workplace. You see what I mean? That's the kind of history that is so very important. Context is very important, so we can begin to see the trajectory between the emergence of black mayors. Why was it that the black mayors didn't want Martin Luther King Jr. to be on the stage with them? Because he was critical of what was happening in Vietnam. He was critical of ruling class in the United States vis-a-vis the poor. And the black mayors knew they were gaining access to a mainstream position. And then Martin was too radical. But this is the 1960s we talking. Can you imagine now 50-some years later, now we got a president, black president. Black masses still dealing with poverty. New Jim Crow strong as ever. Police still shooting down the brothers and sisters like with no accountability for the most part. You see that? So that it's just a matter of being honest and frank and candid. And saying, if we tell this truth and people try to trash us, people try to undermine us, we say, hey, we got a long history of folk who tried to tell the truth and got trashed. A long history of folk tried to tell the truth and got devalued and dismissed. No, we're going to tell the truth, but we still do it in a spirit of learning and listening. We got to be jazz-like. See, we got to learn from our musicians, you see.
Yeah.
That none of them thought they had a monopoly on the full sound. There's all these different interpretations of the sound. Everybody's voice can reshape the sound. So it is with black radicals. But, we dealing with some serious power.
Yeah.
You end up getting killed. I mean, death threats that so many of us have lived under all these decades. Those are serious issues with your loved ones and things.
Well, you made a salient point, because wasn't it Fred Hampton who said in the speech, he said, you don't defeat capitalism with black capitalism, you defeat it with socialism. And the thing is that from what he was saying was that we got to go a completely different direction than what has actually brought us here, our ancestors here as slaves. So to be one who, tries to acclimate yourself to an oppressive system, it's not going to work any way you slice it. So we have to go about it differently. And so a lot of people have been propagandized, to think that, oh, we just got to do it the same way that the oppressors have been doing, and I think we'll be okay. And that we have seen that experiment happen ever since Fred Hampton said that years ago. We've been seeing black capitalists on the rise, and we still are catching hell even down to this day. And we have been seeing that. And so now we're looking at it and we're going, you know what? I think Fred Hampton was right. And I think we need to start going a completely different direction, which is one of the reasons why your voice is so respected, because you're saying that from the mountaintops. We need to go in a different direction. This is not working out. We need to do something better for everybody else. And then you got some people, unfortunately, some of our black brothers and sisters who are at the black faces and high places and going, shh, hey, you ruined our gravy train over here. Stop it. Shush. And unfortunately, they're throwing the tomatoes at you, but you're still sounding the alarm. And we got to be the ones that, even though we got tomato on our face from them, we still got to sound the alarm, because people are listening and people are realizing that the system that we have right now just isn't working, and it doesn't cut the mustard.
Oh, it's true. It's got to be characterized as a failure.
Yes.
It cannot deliver goods and services to precious poor folk, no matter what color they are. I mean, what is the system in place for if it cannot respect the dignity and provide goods and resources for the least of these? You see? And so that people say, well, okay, you got different gradations of failure. That's true. That's true. You got outright fascist regimes that the right-wing Republican Party, Trump and company represent. Fascism is worse than relative failure of certain kind of democratic experiments. There's no doubt about that. But the relative failure of democratic experiments are still authoritarian, xenophobic, predatory capitalists and still
Exactly.
imperialists.
Exactly.
And so you have to be able to tell those kind of truths, even though you make a distinction between, a gangster and a quasi thug, or a gangster and a milquetoast coward. I mean, you still have to be able to use language that is truthful enough. It keeps track of how people are connected to the structures that reproduce people's misery and poverty. See, and I think that is what is a distinctive feature of a radical. Now, of course, as a revolutionary Christian like myself, I don't really get too caught up with the isms, because I just want to make sure we have social structures that are tied to the abolition of poverty, tied to the abolition of any system, mass incarceration and so forth, that loses sight of the dignity of people. I'm part of a democratic socialist movement because it is the most, what would be the right word? It for me, it provides a lens through which to keep track of the rich humanity of poor people. And so socialism in that regard is a kind of radical democratic project that wants people's voices to be heard at the highest levels in institutions that shape their lives. And so it ends up being called socialist. But you can imagine, people can call, China socialist. Well, they ain't socialist at all. So it's a question of the names, you see what I mean? But we're talking about the results. What are the effects? Are poor people's poverty being abolished, eliminated concretely? Are working people able to shape their destiny? Is the greed at the top, which is running amok? Is there any accountability? Is there any accountability of the police? Is there any accountability of the teachers that don't care? And so forth and so on. So those are kind of the broader issues of what it is to try to be a force for good, to create a decent society. And there's no doubt that socialist insights are going to play a very important role. But you can imagine, as a revolutionary Christian, any kind of ism, I know I got to have a little bit of suspicion against it, because it can hide and conceal something that needs to be revealed.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, James. I'll toss it right back to you. There's as I was saying before, when you have capitalism, Malcolm X said, if you show me the capitalist, I'll show you the bloodsucker, a bloodsucker. And you was mentioning how we have fight against slavery. And I liked how you point out, like, all right, I'm just dealing with the reality of the situation, where you look at the systems in place and we justly criticize them. That's what Marxism is. Marxism is a critique of capitalism. And I always propose this question to capitalists, and because you mentioned how we got to fight against slavery, and I propose a simple question: when has capitalism ever existed without slavery? Don't worry, I'll wait. Because if you guys think you're enjoying all the modern benefits of society, that's come through African child slave labor, Asian child slave labor. Even now, we have slavery. We got slavery that is implemented through the prison industrial complex. So if you want to stand against white supremacy, I quote Malcolm X. I quote him again. Malcolm X himself said, "It's impossible for a white person to believe in capitalism and not believe in racism. You cannot have a capitalism. You cannot have capitalists without racism." So that's why I think, and you mentioned before, we got quality true. We got quality. We got to call it how it is, and we got to look at policy that will actually implement and improve our society. And I love the classes disparity. I'm trying to get to all your main points, because this is something that's a main subject of what I cover, because I cover the class war, foreign policy, class war, state violence. Those are three of my main things. Now you have the black capitalist class who believe that capitalism is the path to our salvation, despite all evidence to the contrary. But what black capitalism leads to is mostly just blacks oligarchs exploiting lower black working class, the same way you have in normal capitalism. So when you have capitalism as a system, you cannot have that system in place without having a massive prison industrial complex. That's why the prison industrial complex exists. That's why the military industrial complex exists. And then when you push these people, when you push people who are pro-war, at the end of the day, they will even admit it. They will say, yeah, we spend a lot of money on the military because it's a job program. And by the way, it's a very inefficient job program because it's a job program that everyone can't do, unlike a federal jobs guarantee, by the way. So you have the Democratic Party that uplifts this prison industrial complex system that enslaves our own people, prison slave labor. You have the Democratic Party that destabilizes the entire Middle East with the help of our current president, Joseph Biden. You have them bombing Africa right now. You have them destabilizing countries in South America. And I don't know, like, you can call that fascism. You can call it neoliberalism. But to me, the label does not matter. The what matters to me is the fact that you're complicit with crimes against humanity. Do you want to say it is the destabilization of the Middle East? Is that neoliberalism or is that fascism? Because the destabilization of the Middle East was under the banner of neoliberalism. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not. This is not me making the argument that fascism is not inherently worse, is not worth fighting for. What my argument I am making is the neoliberalism in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. So I'm not trying to just make this a partisan thing. Both parties are complicit with it. It's about the human cost that you're responsible for. And I don't care what you call the ideology. I don't care if you call it fascism. I don't care if you call it neoliberalism. If you're responsible for millions and millions of dead people because of the policy that you implement, that's something that we must fight for. Now, I want to use that opportunity to pivot this. I know that we got into a deep conversation there. I think it translates to what we were just talking what we're about to talk about now, because I'm talking about the evils of the Democratic Party and their crimes, whether it be under the banner of neoliberalism or fascism. They're complicit with insane crimes. You had Joe Biden that is funding the apartheid and genocide of the Palestinian people right now. And now we had Nina Turner who ran, and she just made the basic mistake, according to the neoliberal mindset, is of saying that Palestinian people deserve a freedom. And because of that, you had a ton of dark Israeli money, ton of dark Republican money that the Democratic Party teamed up with. So yeah, there's an idea that we maybe find fascism for voting for the Democratic Party, but the Democratic Party in a heartbeat will side with the fascists. They'll side with genocidal maniacs against our movement. So I want to pass it to you, Cornel. I ran it for a while. What's your thoughts on the Neo-Turner loss and the Democratic Party response? Because the DCCC and Hakeem Jeffries himself said their main priority right now is not spending money to defeat Republicans, which their mandate claims it should be. That's what the DCCC is all about. They're spending all their money on primary challenges. They're spending all their money to prevent someone like Nina Turner from being elected. So my take is, I want to get your takes on the race that Nina Turner just had, what they could have done different, and why do you think what do you think the path forward, like when going against a Democratic Party machine that can spend so much money to defeat Nina Turner like this in the first place?
Well, brother, I first just want to salute your brilliance, though, man. Because I think you do have a clarity. You and Brother James.
That means a lot, brother. That means a lot.
It's true that there's a clarity in what you're saying that's very, very important. Very important. Because anytime you talk about a particular local election, like my dear sister Nina Turner, you always have to contextualize it. You see, the Democratic Party is the neoliberal wing of the ruling class in an empire that is undergoing deep decay, spiritual, moral dysfunctionality in its political system. More and more citizens have completely dropped out, as we mentioned before. So you only talk about a slice of the electorate, because most people have dropped out completely. You see, so that when you zero in on the Democratic Party, what do you see? Because we already saw the collapse of the conservative wing of the ruling class with Trump, and the neo-fascists took over, and they still very strong, and they're trying to come back. So that the collapse of the conservative establishment and the Republican Party, and now the neo-fascists trying to take over. In the Democratic Party, you have, as people talk about it, right? You got this corporate center, and that's the rot in the Democratic Party. It's the corporate center. And that corporate center is Wall Street and Silicon Valley and so forth, with its imperial tentacles. And it's all around the world. You got 800 and some military bases of the United States around the world. Russia and China and Europe together only have about 38, 39. So that you got 800 of them. And so when we talk about Nina Turner in a decrepit, rottling Democratic Party with progressives on the fringes, they got a lot of fire. They've got wonderful language at times, and it's wonderful only in a relative sense, relative to the milquetoast neoliberalism and the neo-fascism. But because we don't have a third party, the people don't have a third alternative, and feel as if, okay, things are so bad, how do we attempt to find a way out when what is presented to us is either these neo-fascist Republicans hold them at arm's length, even though we got more and more black Republicans moving in that neo-fascist way, we should acknowledge that, but still a small percentage of the black community. And you've got the predominance, the hegemony of black politicians in a milquetoast, neoliberal, corporate-centered Democratic Party. That's what most of them are, and that's part of the shadow of Obama. Yeah. But not only that, Obama was the culminating moment, the highest level of success of that milquetoast neoliberalism. Symbolically, it's very important because the white supremacy cut so deep, the idea of just having a black man in a White House built by Africans, enslaved Africans, was a significant symbol. There's no doubt about that. I won't call that into question, but we have to have the clarity that you're talking about. If you're going to drop 26,000 bombs every year and call yourself a man of peace, hey, you got to get off the crack pipe quick. Yep. Very, very quick. Nina Turner comes along, tied to Brother Bernie. Bernie's independent, never been a member of the Democratic Party, forced to work with them, and then reinforces their progressive wing, but it's still a progressive wing that can be crushed any minute. We saw him crush Bernie twice. And Christopher Hedges and others, my dear brother Chris, he was telling me Brother West, you out there doing 112 events for Bernie the first time, 120 the next time. I love you to death, but I don't think you ought to be doing that kind of work because you got other energy you can be doing nothing. I said, well, at this moment, this might be the best way to educate people, get people exposed to new ways of looking at the world and so forth and so on. But more than likely, he will get crushed because the neoliberals will come together. Get a phone call from Obama, Biden, Pete, Amy, boom, they all come together to crush him because in November looked like we had with Nevada looked like we had a chance for a while, you see. But even Bernie himself doesn't have a substantive critique of imperialism. No, not at all. He's got a critique of right-wing xenophobic leaders in Israel, of Netanyahu, but that's a very, very low bar.
Yep.
God, if anybody can't criticize Netanyahu, then go on and join Trump's party and just do it American style. And the Israeli left has no strong left either. And so the Palestinians find themselves subject to this vicious treatment of domination and occupation and subordination and subjugation. And you say, hey, this Palestinian baby got the same value as a Jewish baby or black baby or white baby, what Brother James was talking about. Not one member of the Democratic Party can say one word when 550 Palestinian babies are killed in 50 days. They can't say one word. That's sick. If that happened to Jewish babies, there ought to be voices, my voice, your voice, all of our voices would be heard for Jewish babies. Rightly so, because we care about Jewish babies. But when it's Palestinian babies, and it's just a few voices like ourselves, and no Democrats can say a word, then we know that's sick. Spiritually, morally, that is sick. There's no way that one can live a life and not raise one's voices when any babies are being killed like that. And it's not just the babies, but innocent people across the board. I think innocence across in general. So with Nina, what do? Well, we have to decide. There's going to be some radicals that say, I think you're wasting your time. Even if Nina wins, it's not going to be that big an impact. And for those of us who had a critical support of any attempt at dealing with the Democratic Party, because I've never been a member of the Democratic Party, ever. Even though I've been a member of the Democratic Platform Committee. because Brother Bernie asked me to be, but I walked in the free black man. Hey, y'all, I ain't a member of y'all. I'm free. The brother asked me to do it. And these are the issues we're going to hit. Wall Street, Israeli occupation, workers' rights, trade unionization, abolishing poverty, and so forth. And that's exactly what we did. And we lost on all of them but one. But that's exactly what we did. So that we have to have voices like yourselves and others recognizing, even if Sister Nina wins, you're still part of a rottening Democratic Party. You have to be honest about that. Brianna was saying the same thing in that regard, you see. But then I can understand what Brother Tim Black's saying. He said, well, I agree with that, but I'm going with Nina anyway, because in terms of having some kind of possibility of pushing public policy, we might have stronger voices. And I kind of hate to see, Sister Tim and Brother Tim and Sister Brianna going at it, because I love both of them. I think both of their voices are very, very important. I know we don't necessarily have to get into that, but I've been hearing about them going at each other.
I just don't think you should ever be talking to a black woman that way, but that's on the point.
I try to learn from them, and actually, and you're right. You don't ever want to.
I don't know if you saw the quotes, but it was pretty disgusting. But that's beside the point. I don't like my whole thing. I want to promote black solidarity. If you have a disagreement with someone, there's literally no reason to go on an unhinged, creepy rant. And that's the kind of solidarity we're not trying to bring over what electoral politics over a politician. Nina Turner is a strong woman. She will be fine. Like with the idea that you got to attack activists and journalists because they have a different perspective for you on one race and do it in a very ugly way. Like it's not like there was a substantive disagreement. It was very ugly. I think that's something that we have to condemn because apparently he back at it again, attacking us tonight. But I'm not about that drama. I'd rather focus on the issue.
Well, the thing is, you got to focus on the suffering of the people. That's got to be the major priority. No matter what. Now, you're going to have intense disagreement. That's fine. I mean, I think it's very important to always learn from the variety of voices. Brother Tim got something to teach us. Y'all got something to teach us. Sister Brianna got something to teach us. A whole wave of different radical voices. But you got to connect it to the suffering of the people. And you're right. It can certainly get distracted. And you end up, saying things that would probably best not say it, whatever the interpretation of what the context is and so forth and so on. But the crucial thing is this, that if we're able to keep contact with the structures in place, you begin to see how the left needs stronger structures, stronger institutions, because right now the empire is undergoing such decay and deterioration, and the attempt of some kind of radical awakening and radical renewal is so difficult, because even when you do have people in the street, you get the neoliberals come with their program of diversity and equity to try to devour the energy and mainstream it and streamline it. And too often they're still too indifferent to the black poor and working classes. So the black middle classes end up being, again, the major beneficiaries of the massive demonstration against the public lynching of our dear brother, George Floyd Jr. They give millions of dollars to opportunities for the black middle class. What does the black poor and black working class get from it? Hardly anything at all. Mm-hmm. That's what is upsetting to me, you see. And we have to come up with ways, first, of raising our voices to let folk know that for us, black, poor, and working people are the major priorities, just like the legacy of those who we talked about before, be it Malcolm or Martin or Fannie Lou or Angela Davis, or any of the others who focus in that way, because we're emerging out of a period in which that massive incorporation of the black middle class and the black bourgeoisie has made their voices center stage and want to push aside all of the radical voices and try to devalue, if not dismiss, those voices, so they remain center stage. And too often, the black middle class voices are tied to narrow careerism and opportunism, and not a fundamental commitment to zeroing in on the plight of black poor and working people.
Yeah, well said. Once again, do you have I got a lot to add from that. Do you have anything you want to put in, James, before I go?
Just wanted to say, one of the first things that I wanted to point out was, and maybe I hope my point isn't taken the wrong way, but as far as, and I don't want to argue semantics of it, but I feel like neoliberalism is on the road to fascism, and so
Mm,
that's a road that is extremely dangerous. And the thing is that we on the left, we are not radical, not by the slightest, because wanting people to have health care is not a radical position. Wanting to save the planet is not a radical position.
that's true.
Wanting black men and black women and people who are working class not be shot by police and mistreated by police is not a radical position.
That's true.
The corporatism is a radical position. The imperialism is a radical position. The austerity is a radical position. And so the only people that should be seen as radical and extremist are many of the people who are milquetoast neoliberals, the ones that got $12,000 refrigerators with ice cream in it, the ones who are helping, companies like BlackRock buy up a whole bunch of homes all over the United States. Those are the actual extremists. Those are the actual radicals, because their policies are facilitating and exacerbating the death in this country. And so when I see people like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and people like Nancy Pelosi, they are in class solidarity with the Joe Manchins and the Mitch McConnells and the Donald Trumps. They are in class solidarity, and it shows in their actions, but they say it differently in their rhetoric. And so you can kind of call it a slight pushback, but the thing is that from what we've been seeing is that their solidarity is more with the upper echelons of society and the class. And we have to, as I always say, make the comfortable uncomfortable,
Hmm.
because if they're uncomfortable, then that's when change really comes.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, we're not doing our part to make them uncomfortable, and it's not. It doesn't have to be in a extremely violent way. It doesn't have to be, but it's going to get to that point eventually if they don't change, because pitchforks and torches will be coming at the door eventually. We don't want it to happen, but it's going to be an inevitable fact that it will happen. So that's
Hmm.
the point I just
Yeah,
want to
no,
make.
no, I hear you, my brother. I hear. Now, let me just highlight three quick points in your
Sure.
very, very rich formulations. One
Hmm.
is your point about the fascism within the neoliberal regimes.
Yeah.
Just like we had liberalism and apartheid. Apartheid is
Hmm.
crypto-fascist.
Yeah. Hmm.
And you had apartheid in the United States from the
Definitely.
1860s all the way up to the 1960s, given
Definitely.
all the liberalisms, so that the juxtaposition is very real. And
Hmm.
when we talk about the new Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander and others have written about with such insight, and Angela's been so concerned about, you see, those are forms of fascist practices within the neoliberal regime. I've
Yes.
taught in prison for
I.
44 years. I know exactly what those prisons are
I.
all about. You see what I mean?
Yes.
So your point is very good, but then when you go internationally, in the way in which neoliberalism has reinforced in its policies around the world, thoroughly fascist,
Yeah.
authoritarian regimes.
Oh,
Look at
definitely.
Haiti, look at
Mm.
Honduras, supporting military, so forth, so on. So
Yeah.
that point I think is a crucial one. Now, your use of the word radical again is an interesting one for me, because you see, when you say that the corporate folk, they're the real radical ones in a certain sense. See, for me, I would say that they're thuggish, they're gangsterish. You see, for me, radical is not tied to gangster and thugs.
Okay.
You
I
see
I
what I mean?
I
I
concede
just
to
call it,
that.
because radical means get to the root, right?
Yeah.
And when you get to the root and you say, well, okay, CLR James is radical and Claudia Jones is radical and Stokely Carmichael, they get into the root of it. It's the gangsters who don't want to get to the root of it, because if they get to the root, it undercuts their own power. It undercuts the lies that they tell in order to justify their crimes. You see them? So it's just a matter of semantics there.
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying? Now, for me, I am an extremist, but again, see, as a revolutionary Christian, you see, Jesus went into the money changers, that the temple was the largest edifice east of Rome. They had hundreds of Roman troops protecting it. You had bankers in there. You had intellectuals rationalize the bankers. You had the artists. He went in there anyway and ran out the money changers, and they crucified him. That's the reason why he was crucified.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? That means that he was an extremist.
Yeah, Herod didn't like him at all.
When people call me an extremist, I say, you got the right brother. But he was an extremist of love.
Yeah.
He was an extremist of justice.
Yeah.
He was an extremist of freedom. Well, the extremists are only the Klan. No, those are gangsters. Those are thugs. And just call it that. You see? Well, Brother West, you are a gangster. Well, okay, I might have some gangster in me. That's the truth. You're right about that. Pray for me.
We all do, yeah.
In my own action and deed, you'll see that I'm trying to conquer the gangster every day. And so in terms of my own witness, they can't say, well, you gangster across the board, trashing folk, especially poor folk. No, that's not true. Quit lying about me. Quit lying. I'm wrestling with the gangster inside of me every day. Yeah. And watch what I say, watch what I do, and you'll see some kind of consistency of trying to tell the truth for whatever it is. 45 years it's been 50 years now as an activist, right? So in that sense, I'm with you 100%. It's just a matter of that word.
Yeah,
but then the last question becomes, and this is the toughest one, is that, whether the species, has the cultivated capacity to avoid self-destruction, which is an ecological question tied to greed running amok. Same is true with capitalism. You see, capitalism is driven by a level of unregulated greed. And it's precisely that greed that results in the complete undermining, not just of the planet, but the undermining of society, because folk just so greedy. They're so hateful. And those are questions that cannot be ignored, but we still must organize, we must mobilize, we must fight no matter what. I don't believe in just predicating our struggles on how things look. No. We go down fighting because it's right, period.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? No matter what, right across the board. And that's the spiritual and the moral questions, not just political questions.
You know what? Just to go back to your point, and I want to stand corrected, because
but does it make sense though? Because I could be wrong.
Yeah. It's just you can be extremist, but it matters in what you're extreme in.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying. Yeah. So, we can be extreme in our love and compassion, and that's what we are. If we are extremists, then we are extremists in that. We are harbingers of love and compassion, and wanting that to be the governing force over the country and the world, ultimately. And so that's basically, I get what you're doing. I pick up what you're throwing down. I pick up what you're throwing down.
That's much more eloquent than I could have put it right there, though, brother. We are the harbingers of that love. Absolutely. Indeed. In the way our mamas are extremists in terms of their love for us.
I love that.
Yes, sir.
Nick, I know y'all done something right or done something wrong. I'm going to love you anyway. That's an extremist love. That's right. I'm an extremist of love. Well, we like that for the working classes and poor people around the world, including our neighborhoods and our hoods. That's how we roll.
That's how we roll.
That was I love that exchange so much. That was a powerful exchange of ideas. There's a lot to unpack there. I'm gonna give my take, and then I can give Dr. Cornel West last thoughts. I love that you mentioned the new Jim Crow, and you mentioned it more than once. Now, we have conversations about reparations a lot on this program, and we believe that reparations is something that we must fight for and advocate for unapologetically.
Absolutely.
Now, absolutely. And I'm gonna give. And the new Jim Crow and what you just laid out is just one of many reasons why. Because you hear this from, and even liberal-minded white people, if you look at the polls, because I'm more than willing to acknowledge that reparations is not at a level of popularity we need it to be right now. But keep in mind that it has jumped significantly, but that's beside the point. Now, the new Jim Crow, and this is something that I highlight on my show because there's not a lot of shows that do this, because this is a rare black space where we talk about these black issues. A lot of people they have no idea that the racial income inequality that we are dealing with right now is worse than it was at the height of the civil rights era. It's worse right now. Now, how could that be? That's one of those stats that shock people to their consciousness when I tell them that. The new Jim Crow has significantly amount to do with that. And this is why anyone who say, oh, we can't pay reparations, you wasn't a slave. I didn't do anything to you. No. Shut up and listen. Do you guys understand that civil asset forfeiture steals more money than the working class than criminal burglary does? Now, who is impacted by civil asset forfeiture the most? Because of broken windows policing. There was a study that was done out of South Carolina that shows that 60% of the people who were victims of civil asset forfeiture was black. This is what we had to deal with right now. And then we can go on housing, as Afeni laid out as well. The fact that, I can tell a longer story, but I was defrauded. I even got a check in the mail because I would charge a higher interest rate on my first car loan than an average white person at the same time. I had my mom who co-signed for me for a car loan when we was 18. Now, if you put a white family in that same exact situation, they will have lower interest rates. So I would charge significantly higher. And as someone who lived in poverty my entire life, those extra savings that I paid on interest rates could have helped me significantly. I cannot emphasize that enough. So I lay out, and I'm trying not to go too long here, there is massive amount of systemic problems that we go through that steals and vilify our people. And I'm talking about the prison industrial complex in this particular instance, but you have Wall Street, who was illegally kicking black women, black single moms, black people, black families, wherever you want to say, out of their homes illegally. And people like Kamala Harris let those people off the hook. So our people have been a victim of this United States capitalist system, and it never stopped. The idea that it somehow got better, it never stopped. That's why people may think we sound radical. No, I am standing for my people. So when I see the fact that you had cops that kill black people without impunity, when I see that they are just stealing our wealth, because people talk about, even liberals will talk about how the cops kill us, but why are people not talking about how they steal our wealth? Through regressive fines and fees that they go after our community through broken windows policing. This is why we got to pay reparations on top of slavery, on top of the generational wealth divide that we have there. So that's why I love that you brought the new Jim Crow up, because when I challenge the modern Democratic Party, to me, my personal opinion, this is my personal opinion. Now, people who make the claim that if we vote for Joe Biden or if we support the Democratic Party, we find white supremacy, to me, that's laughable. Because if you look at the police state, the Democratic Party is the party of the police state. Do you know it was Amy Klobuchar who didn't go after Derek Chauvin? Stop and frisk was implemented in New York. We saw how crazy LAPD is. That's California. So I'm all for calling out every single party that's complicit with evil, because the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are complicit with evil. Now, what we got to do, we got to accurately point out the enemy and what the black capitalists, and I'm sorry I'm going long, I'm trying to sum up everything you were saying, because you also bring up the black bourgeoisie and the class divide, and there is a giant class divide among black people that I've noticed that I've been calling out for a long time. These are the people who would support Charlottetown Brown over Nina Turner, for example. Just one of many examples. These are the black people who supports Eric Adams, someone who's still supportive of stop and frisk, because they know they won't be impacted, because this policing is often done on class lines as well. My point is, I know I went long here. I think we need a new post Bernie Sanders left. Now, I've been so happy with a lot of things you've been saying, because there's, I'm trying not to go too long, but it's hard to wrap this up.
No, you take your time, brother.
Yeah,
You
mentioned. I'm glad that you called out Bernie on his weakness and imperialism, because people think I'm being unreasonable when I call these people out for being weak on black issues. Why are you not supporting reparations? Ilhan Omar, someone who I had great respect for, just voted for a military weapons deal to Israel. That's unacceptable. Your colleague is Palestinian, Rashid Tlaib. right? Hopefully I'm getting that correct. But I believe she's Palestinian. How is that vote now betrayal of her? How is when the squad is complicit with funding the police more, which they used January 6th to do that? They've coordinated the votes to fund the police more, knowing that the police would take that money and criminalize our community. How is that okay? How is that okay? Now you can show radical love towards these people, but as me personally, as being someone who have family members who've been impacted by these policies, I find these kind of things we have to call out. We have to speak truth on that, and we gotta demand that we actually have a black agenda, because without a true black agenda, without supporting Medicare for all, without supporting reparation, without supporting the end of the prison industrial complex, you are complicit with our death. You are complicit with our struggle. Yeah, so she is Palestinian. I'll go on top of my head. I didn't want to misspeak, but I'm pretty sure she was. But how is that vote not betrayal on that end? Now, I'm not trying to just criticize these people just to criticize them, but these are real substantive things that we have issues with. And meanwhile, there's a like the managerial left, like the 10 black left, they'll get mad at us for calling these things out. I don't have any hatred for these people, but you got to be honest when you calling out politicians and going after and attacking activists when they have substantive criticisms of these politicians when they're not representing your community. That's unacceptable to me. And I'm sorry I went so long. I barely forgot my point. But my point, but I'll pass. But we're about an hour in. I appreciate you coming in and joining us, Dr. Well, I want to give you the floor to respond to anything I said, any last messages that you want to promote. But you like this conversation was so important, and that's what we want to do here at Hampton Leftists is bounce ideas, because you are a very influential figure among the black left, and these conversations are so important. So I appreciate you coming on here so much. Floor is yours. You got anything last words you want to say?
Well, again, though, see, you all just inspire me, and you inform me that you have to call people out in terms of making them accountable. Anybody who votes for more money with no accountability conditions under a vicious occupation and domination needs to be morally and spiritually criticized. It's wrong. I don't care what the politician, I don't care what color they are and so forth. Exactly. And it's just a matter of the golden rule. You know, if that was your people, you wouldn't want their humanity to be rendered invisible with more money going to military to engage in such vicious attacks on their children and so forth. It's just the golden rule. It's Sonny Rollins used to tell me all these. Say, Brother West, it's just the golden rule, man. Coltrane talking about love supreme and how you translate that on the ground politically, critique the capitalism, imperialism. That's just what it is. So that you all integrate tradition in calling it into question. When Jesus ran out the gangsters in the temple, that was radical love. Radical love ain't no mamby-pamby form of passivity.
Exactly.
Love is a verb, just like hope is a verb. It's an action. You're engaging, you're intervening, and you're doing it intellectually. You're trying to get people to see. Can't you see the humanity of Palestinians? It took a long time for Europe to see the humanity of Jews. Mm-hmm. So we're in solidarity with the Jews if nobody sees their humanity. We're in solidarity with the Palestinians. Nobody sees their humanity. We're in solidarity with black folk, indigenous people, anybody whose humanity's been lost, and act as if they're afterthought, and more monies for more military attacks and so forth, and assaults and attacks and so forth and so on. So don't feel bad about calling out. This is very important. This is one of the roles of truth tellers. It really is. But it's, again, it's done in a spirit of our musicians. You see when if you in St. Louis and Donny Hathaway walks the streets into the black community, how come the black people run up to him and hug him? It's because they know that he's emptying himself with his gifts in order to empower them. Mm-hmm. James Brown walked the streets. It ain't a matter of politics. People gonna run up to him in the 1960s and 70s and hug him. How come? Because his funk is a survival tool. His funk is empowering of people. And I'm talking about myself, so this ain't no abstract thing, right? Well, what we need, Brother Nix, Brother James, Sister Afeni, the whole Fred Hampton network, when they hear about, when they see Nick and James, they say, oh, Lord, that's like Tupac. We got to run up and hug them. How come? Because Tupac's art speaks to our reality, because he helps us empower us in the face of that reality. Now, we know Tupac got a thuggish side. He told us about it. He's honest about it.
Yeah.
But whatever thuggish side he got, it doesn't exhaust his genius. It doesn't foreclose him telling the truth to empower. We need intellectuals who are like our musicians. So when the people see us, they'll say, there goes somebody telling the truth. There goes somebody caring about me. There goes somebody concerned about me. They might not be able to make revolution now, because I wish we could make it now, but we can't make it because we don't have no organizations strong enough. We don't have any institutions strong enough for fundamental transformation. Martin was calling for what? Revolution at the end of his life. Why? Because he had to love. Now, when people see Martin, they would run to him the way they run to Donny Hathaway, right? When people see Malcolm, they'd run to him like they run to Donny Hathaway. And we're talking about Christians running to Muslims. You know, that in 1960, that's a big move now. Big move. Oh, there go Allah loving free black man. I'm a Jesus loving free black man. We hugging each other. That's exactly right. How come? Because we want to be honest, candid in our integrity and honesty, and loving the people and telling the truth about their condition, such that we're going to raise our voices at any cost. That's a beautiful thing.
It is.
That's a great tradition of a great people. And that's where y'all come from. You come from the great wing of a great people, black people. And that's worth holding up the highest standards, the highest standards. That's why D'Angelo takes so much time to produce his albums, because he knows where the standards are. They way up there with Ella Fitzgerald and Billie Holiday and Aretha Franklin and Mahalia Jackson, and we can go on and on. He knows what the standards are. But that's what it is with intellectuals. That's what it is with Nick and James and Afeni and them. Y'all know what the standards are. So it's more important to keep track of the standards than it is the low-grade popularity. You see what I mean? This is very important.
Yeah.
Curtis Mayfield could have been popular. He didn't win any Grammys. Well, not one record. Sly Stone didn't win one Grammy. Sam Cooke didn't win one Grammy. Milli Vanilli won 2. Lip singing.
Girl, you know it's true.
I mean, and we love Milli Vanilli. You know what I mean? We love them.
Yeah, we do.
The truth about the brother.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Exactly. I love Jody Watley to this day. He my everything is rich. You my everything is rich. Jody knows she ain't Aretha. She'd be the first one to tell you that. She knows what the standards are. Y'all are keeping the standards, the radical standards. That's why when I began talking about Glenn Ford. I could talk about Ajumu Baraka. Y'all read Ajumu Baraka stuff, the Black Alliance for Peace, trying to understand the analysis of capitalism, empire, ways in which the inclusion and the absorption takes place, so the people don't want to say a mumbling word about what's happening in the Caribbean, in Haiti, in Colombia, the AFRICOM in Africa. Bombs dropped day in and day out under Democratic Party presidents, including Obama. No, people just want that little sanitized, deodorized, sterilized story about narrow black progress. Hey, If you want a black version of Pat Boone, then don't go to the Apollo. Because the Apollo, you're going to get some real funky stuff, and that's where the greatness is.
Because they tell you where to go.
And if you ain't ready on Wednesday night,
they tell you where to go.
If you
ain't doing it right at the Apollo.
If you ain't ready. And of course, sometimes you ain't ready. What do? You practice hard. Come back 6 months later. Might be able to make the grade. You know what the standards are? Well, there's standards in our struggle for freedom. And if Obama and the other black neoliberals are somehow setting the highest standards, then we all just ought to go with Pat Boone rather than Curtis Mayfield, and go with Kenny G rather than Coltrane, and be honest about it. But we got our standards.
We do.
We got our standards, and we're not giving up our standards. You know why? Because blood, sweat, tears, service, sacrifice for 400 years went into the making of those standards.
Oh, yeah.
And we ain't gonna have no black bourgeoisie come along and try to undercut the sources of the standards that produce what we know to be the highest levels.
Yep.
That's why we stand, but we do it with a smile. And we
Of course,
do it with our
always.
style. And see, Nick's style got to be different than James, because we lift every voice. That's the anthem of black people.
Yeah.
And when you have your voice, you ain't imitating nobody. You finding your own voice. Billie Holiday ain't gonna be imitating Ella Fitzgerald. She got her own voice coming out of Baltimore, and Ella got hers from Newport News, Virginia. All of those voices know what the highest standards are, but we're digging inside of ourselves as we empower each other. That's why our great musicians set the standards for our movement, because they are so free. And not just musicians, the Richard Pryor, who is an artist. The artist set the larger agenda. But politically, we then take it, the spirit, and say, now we're going to keep track of this black suffering, because these black people are so precious and priceless that if it's capitalism that's producing the damage, we're going to tell that story. If it's imperialism that's doing the damage, we're going to tell that story. If it's homophobia that's doing the damage, if it's transphobia, if it's patriarchy, if it's colorism, anything that's doing the damage of precious black people and other oppressed people, we're going to keep track of it, just like the musicians keep track of the notes and the silences between the notes in order to empower. That's part of the greatness of our people. And it's a joy to be part of such a great black people in great black tradition.
Yep.
Yeah.
It really is.
It's a privilege, yeah.
It's an honor to be in the fight as black people. Like that's why we started Hampton Leftists. I'm in this fight with JB. I'm in this fight with Rome. I'm in this fight with RJ. I'm in fight with Jackie. I'm in this fight with Breonna Joy Gray. I'm in this fight with all my black allies. And that's the importance, and that's what we want to spread on this network, is building this black solidarity. Not this thing where we attack each other just because we have small disagreements like some other people, but we want to build black solidarity where we can exchange ideas, where we can fight for liberation unapologetically. Which I know I kind of forgot my earlier point, but I was talking about the new Jim Crow, and this ties into what my point here now is. When I lay out the state of the black community, that's not me trying to be doomer. That's just me trying to explain the reality of the situation. Right. If you're someone who is doing the opposite of what you would call being a doomer, someone who is selling hope, you are not getting people in a position where they can actually fight for their liberation and their prosperity in an effective way, because they are under mass delusions. So what we are dealing with right now is we are living in a post-capitalist, late stage capitalist hellscape, where the UN just released how climate change is pretty much irreversible now. You have a police state that is out of control, that's continuing to get more funding. So what can we do as a black people? I think we need to start looking at alternatives and ways so we can survive this society. At this point, it's kind of too late to change it. We got a lot, and I'm not trying to be doomer. I'm just trying to tell it how it is. Like, so we got to look at strategy on how we can actually survive this post-capitalist hellscape, and we do that by solidarity, by socialist communes, by mutual aid societies.
That's right.
And anyway, that's the kind of conversation we want to have on here. I know we took you a little long, but we can have these conversations.
Right. And we should mention the great Octavia Butler's book, Parable of the Sowers, and the Earthseed communities.
Do you have any other book recommendations? I remember someone was asking about that, so I ended with that question.
Yeah, no, it'd be Octavia. I would read Toni Morrison's The Sources of Self-Regard. I would read. We've already talked about Cedric Robinson's Black Marxism. I would read the works of Adolph Reed and his powerful critique of managerial class, professional managerial class, and it's in his collection of essays, Class Notes, and a number of other texts. And I would read some Kimberly Crenshaw and others. People forget that when she talks about a critical race theory, that she's not just talking about race. the whole movement began with her essay on violence against Black women. And it was connected to class and age. See, so it was already what they call intersectional, but it was already open to different structures of domination and how they relate to each other. So that kind of close reading becomes very, very important in terms of where we go from here. And it's very important because these days, you know, so many of the writers, Black writers and intellectuals, that they get so caught with race, like Brother Coates and the others, and I appreciate their voices, but they get so caught talking about race and can't say a mumbling word about capitalism. But we got a big book out there on caste by our dear sister, and 500 pages, not one word, one reference to capitalism in the whole book. You say, wait, how you gonna do this? How you gonna do this now? Oliver Coxon already taught us the relation between class, race, and class. Caste, class, and race. 1948, serious text. You got to come to terms with that. So that it's very important that we don't somehow talk about race outside of the economic capitalist context and the imperial empire-centered context. But that's still, we can still learn from them. I'm not saying don't read Coates and don't read the others, but just recognize that they're talking about race in such an isolated way that they end up being public faces of a certain kind of neoliberalism. You see, that to me is downplaying certain crimes against humanity again in the name of race. You can't do that. Can't do it. But I know I should let y'all go.
There's so much.
But anytime you call, Brother Nick, you know I'm always ready to come learn and listen, though, man.
Yeah, man. Because we can talk about these issues all day, man. Like, there's so much I learned when we had these conversations. So many good ideas, and we want to have these conversations more as we grow. And you coming on this show, I cannot even put enough words how much that means to us, because once again, as I said earlier on this program, you motivated a lot of us in our political journey as Black leftists. So I appreciate you for joining, and for everyone who's watching, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. It's been a great day today at Hampton Leftists, but we upload every single day, so we're gonna have great programs. Wednesday, our roundtables on Thursdays. If there's any show, if you're not gonna miss Thursday roundtables, 4 p.m. Eastern, that's the one you gotta check out, because that's where all the hosts get together. We have a good time talking about the issues. But other than that, we have programs every single day, and we got a stacked week. So if you enjoy our conversation with Dr. Cornel West here today, if you enjoy our conversation with Brown Joy Gray earlier today, I implore you to support the other hosts of the Hampton Leftists. I implore you to support Torah for the Poor with Rome. I implore you to support Affinities and the many mutual aid groups that we are boosting. I had the Poor People's Army on. Please boost these groups. And subscribe, hit the bell. I thank you for all the super chats, all the support on Ko-fi. This is the kind of how stuff we can keep going. But once again, Dr. Cornel West, I appreciate you for coming on. You're an inspiration. Thank you, brother.
No, love y'all. Stay strong.
Thank you, guys. Thank you guys for watching the Social Cinema. We sign off. Take care, guys.
Right on, right on.